Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Bava Batra Daf Aleph. It's the Daf for Shabbat. We're going to get started from the first Mishna at the top of the page. Okay, we're going to first two lines we finished yesterday. We're going to start from here. This is something we actually learned before, so it's good review. If you buy two trees in your property, I don't acquire the land underneath. Rabbi Meir Rabbi Meir actually holds the two trees, you do acquire the land. Higdilu, if the trees grew. Now, I didn't acquire the land, according to Tanakama. Because I didn't acquire the land, if the trees grow, I actually, lo yishapeh, you as the owner of the field is not allowed to cut back my trees. Okay, even though theoretically it's getting in the way, let's say they grow out into your space. Well, the fact is that since I didn't acquire the land, the assumption is, and this is going to be the opposite in the other case, we'll see in a minute. The assumption is that you knew from the beginning that your land was going to serve my trees because my trees are going to be rooted into your ground. So therefore, you also can't cut them because it means I've acquired whatever space my tree needs, both, right, my trees need, both in your land and in your airspace. This actually we saw in a sugya at the very end of Bava Metzia, which you might remember. If things come out of the trunk, like all sorts of, leaves and other stuff grow out of the trunk, if there's some growth there, shalo, belongs to me because it's my tree and it grew from my trunk. But if it grew from the roots, since the roots are in your soil and the soil belongs to you as the owner of the land, anything that grows out of the roots is a new growth, is your tree, and it's not mine or your growth. V'imetu, last part for this case, if the tree dies, and no karka, that's it. I bought the tree, I didn't buy the land, so just the tree is mine. Tree dies, I'm done. But kanash losha, but as soon as we buy 3 trees, if I were to buy 3 trees, kana karka, the land in between and underneath the 3 trees is mine. Higdilu yishapeh. Now here the reverse happens. So while I did acquire the land, I only acquired the land that's around these 3 trees. If they jut out beyond the land that I acquired, well, then you can cut them because you could say, hey, you're in my land now, right? Until then, all of it was mine. It was growing in my property. But if my trees branch out into your field, then you can cut them down. Now, at this point, anything that grows from the trunk or anything that grows from the roots is mine because not only the tree is mine, also the ground is mine because I bought it. Again, I bought the trees, but with the trees comes the land underneath it. And if they die, I can plant new trees because I bought the soil. That's all mine for also future building rights. So those are the 2 cases in the Mishna. Comes the Gemara and quotes a Mishna in Bikurim, which is very similar. Tanan Hatam, there's a Mishna in Bikurim that says, if you buy 2 trees within someone else's field, same case, it means you own the trees, but you don't own the land. So what do you do with Bikurim? Well, we're going to see soon that with Bikurim, it says you come and you make a declaration and you say, I'm bringing the fruits from my land. Well, it's not your land. So what do? You do this in between, which we're going to talk about. Is it really okay to do it in between? But we'll get there. Maybe I bring the Bikurim to the temple, give it to the Kohanim. That's what you do with the first fruits on Shavuot. Ve'eino koreh, but I wouldn't be able to say the declaration because not my land. Rabbi Meir, who we already know from our Mishnah, says meviva koreh. Why? Because I own the land, because that was Rabbi Meir's approach. If I buy 2 trees, I already bought the land. I acquire the land by the nature of having bought the 2 trees. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Now here comes Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel with the following halacha. We're going to have a whole discussion about it till we basically say this halacha doesn't make sense. But we're first going to understand it before we reject it. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, and we'll see in a minute where he gets this from, that Rabbi Meir required even someone who purchases fruits from the shuk to bring Bikurim. You wouldn't read, but you would bring Bikurim just like these 2 trees. Mimai, where does Shmuel get this from? Till now, we've been talking about at least you own the trees. What, you don't even own the trees? You buy fruits in the shuk, you have to bring Bikurim on them. So comes Shmuel, the Gemara, and explains Shmuel and says, where does he get this from? Midikatani Mishnah Yetera. Well, one of these Mishnayot is really unnecessary because once we have this machloket between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis by us, you don't need the Mishnah Bikurim. It's obvious, right? Michti tana ledi yesh lo karka. Once you say that Rabbi Meir holds, you get the land, pshita de meviva koret, right? It's obvious Rabbi Meir is going to disagree and say that you bring the Bikurim and you read the Mikra Bikurim. So there was really no reason for Rabbi Meir to be brought in that Mishnah Bikurim. In other words, yes, you need the basic halacha if you don't own the land, so you bring and you don't read. But you didn't need to add Rabbi Meir there because Rabbi Meir, we know, disagrees and thinks you own the land. And obviously, if he thinks you own the land, then he'll think that you bring the Bikurim and you read the Mikra Bikurim. So what do we assume Shmuel derived? That the fact that Rabbi Meir says, also in the case of two trees, you're going to bring Bikurim and say the declaration, must mean that he really means, even though he didn't say it, something even farther, which is, even if I were to purchase fruits, then I still have to bring Bikurim. So now the Gemara says, right, I just want to point out, if you look at the Rashbam on back earlier in the Gemara where it said, when you buy fruits, just 1 second. One second. No, sorry, I didn't want to read that. Okay, fine. Skip that. Sorry. I thought it was something else. Okay, let's go back. So now the Gemara is going to say, Shmuel got it from the fact that he has this extra line, right? There's this extra line in the Mishnah that wasn't necessary. It must mean that Rabbi Meir goes even farther, which is even perot from the shuk. So now the Gemara is going to say, wait a minute. And this is where we get to the things I kind of mentioned before, but now we'll see it inside. But doesn't it say that you're going to bring from your land? Oh, your land means from Israel. You don't bring Bikurim from produce outside of Israel. So again, according to Shmuel, if you buy it from the shuk, it's still me'aretzecha because it was from the shuk. There was fruits that were from Israel. But it says from your ground. That sounds like not the land of Israel, but your soil. And that didn't grow in your soil. This means you don't bring Bikurim from land that belongs to a Gentile. V'haktiv, third question, Asher natatali. Okay, these are all the psukim. Okay, I can read them to you. V'lakata merishit kol pri adama, you take from the first of your fruits, Asher tavi me'aretzecha, that you'll bring from your land. Asher Hashem Elokecha noten lecha, that God gave you. V'samta betena v'alachta, ela makom asher yivchar Hashem Elokecha. And then it says, what was that? All of them? We had Admatecha comes up in a different pasuk. Sorry, let me read that. Reshit Bikurim Admatcha tavi beit Hashem Elokecha lo tvashel di b'chalei bo. It's actually from a different context. That's a different pasuk. You don't actually say that in the declaration. That just says that you're supposed to bring the first of your fruits from the Adama. And then the third pasuk, Asher Natatali, is in the declaration back to Sefer Dvarim, chapter 26. So here it says, that God you gave me. Now, you didn't give me fruit from the shuk, you gave me in my land. So how do we explain that according to Shmuel? To which the Gemara still has an answer. What does it mean you gave me? You gave me money and I was able to buy produce with it. In other words, everything is what God gave us, okay? It doesn't need to be the land God gave us. It could be money God gave me to be able to afford to buy the fruits. So we're still with Shmuel, still seems to work. So now the Gemara says, Mativ Rabba. Rabba brings a difficulty though. It says, Hakone ilanecha b'toch shel chavero mevi ve'eno koreh. It says if you buy one tree within your friend's field, you bring Bikurim and you don't say the declaration. Lefisha lo kana karka, because you didn't acquire the land. Divrei Rabbi Meir. What's the problem? This is all in the name of Rabbi Meir. Remember Rabbi Meir? Rabbi Meir said 2 trees, you acquire the land. But 1 tree, you don't acquire the land. And comes Rabbi Meir in this statement and says, well, since you don't acquire the land in 1 tree, you don't get the land. 2 trees you do. That's why you say the Mikra Bikurim. But 1 tree, you don't acquire the land, so you bring Bikurim, but you don't say the Mikra Bikurim. You don't say the text. So it seems very clear that Rabbi Meir doesn't think if I own the tree and I don't bring it, it's only 1 tree, and then I don't acquire the land. Obviously, Rabbi Meir is going to think if I went and bought fruits from the shuk, I'm not going to bring Bikurim, to which the Gemara says, and I told you this from the beginning, Tiyuvta, they're going to knock out what Shmuel said. Doesn't make sense that Rabbi Meir would have also said it about buying fruits in the shuk. So we're back to saying that everything that we thought about Shmuel, where he inferred it, is not really true. Maybe the Mishna was a little unnecessary, the line about Rabbi Meir and the Bikurim, and really Rabbi Meir holds 2 trees, you acquire the land, and therefore you're going to say the Mikra Bikurim. But if you don't own the land, you don't say the Mikra Bikurim. Amar le Rabbi Shimon ben Elyakim le Rabbi Elazar. Now we're going to start a slew of questions. Rabbi Shimon ben Elyakim says to Rabbi Elazar, my time at Rabbi Elazar, de Rabbi Meir be'ilan echad, my time at Rabbi Meir b'shnei lanu. Why does Rabbi Meir say, now what's the issue? He doesn't really say it explicitly, but what he's really asking is, either you're obligated in Bikurim or you're not obligated. What's this in between? Bring the first fruits to the temple, but don't say the text. It seems a little in between and doesn't make any sense. If you don't own the land, you're not obligated in Bikurim, and you shouldn't have to bring them at all. So Amar lo, Rabbi Elazar was asked this question, to which Rabbi Elazar responds to the person who asked him and said, Davar sharishonim lo amru botam tishaleni bebeit midrash kedei levasheni. What are you trying to humiliate me? This is something nobody knows the answer to. So you're asking me this in the Beit Midrash so that I can look like a fool that I don't know the answer? Don't ask me this question, basically, is what he's saying. But I'm a Rabba. Rabba comes along and says, my kusha. Okay, it wasn't in the Beit Midrash at the same time, probably. But anyway, Rabba comes and says, I don't even understand the difficulty. It's pretty clear why you bring the Bikurim, even though you don't say the text. Dilma, Rabbi Meir, be'ilan echad, sipukim safkale. Maybe, okay, it's not like he's for sure about this, but he said, I don't get it. What's the problem? You could explain Rabbi Meir is saying he wasn't sure when you buy 1 tree, maybe, perhaps you acquire the land. And the rabbis, Rabbanan b'shnei lenot sipukim safkale. And the rabbi said, when you buy 2, maybe you acquire the land. 1 for sure not, but maybe 2, you acquire the land. And therefore, since it's a suffix, we do exactly what we're used to. You bring the Bikurim, but you don't say the text. And that sounds pretty good. But they say, wait a minute. First of all, we're going to have a number of questions about this. First of all, let me misaptally, technically speaking, could we really say Rabbi Meir wasn't sure? Look at what he said. Hakatane, it said in the Braita we saw before, Lefisha lo kana karka divrei Rabbi Meir. The 1 tree is because you didn't acquire land. That sounds like he wasn't unsure about it. He was certain you don't acquire land, and that's why you bring, but you don't read. You don't say the text. So, Ema Shema lo kana karka. No, you could just reread that and say what he really meant was because maybe you didn't acquire the land, and that's why. So we can go back to saying it's a suffix. But that's going to raise all sorts of other questions. If it's suffix, and we're not sure, are these Bikurim, and are they supposed to be brought to the temple for the Kohen and given to the Kohen? Or are they not? What's the problem? Well, there's a big problem, which is lichush dumala Bikurim yenu. If it's suffix, and we're not sure if you're obligating Bikurim or not, then maybe this isn't Bikurim. And if it's not Bikurim, what's the problem? Well, there's a big rule in the temple. Kama ayil chulin la'azara. You're bringing unsacred things into the temple. You're not allowed to do that. You can't bring an animal that maybe was supposed to be used for a korban, maybe wasn't, because maybe it's chulin and it wasn't consecrated. And if it wasn't consecrated, you can't bring it into the temple. You're not allowed to bring non-consecrated items randomly into the temple because maybe they're consecrated, but maybe they're not. The part that's not, if it's really not, then you can't bring it in. To which the Gemara answers, Dimakdish lahu. Well, what do? You consecrate it out of a doubt. You say, well, if it's Bikurim, then great, it's Bikurim. If it's not, then I'm making this consecrated to the temple. I'm going to give it to the Kohen as a gift, which you could do. So then the Gemara says, V'habayim michlinu. But wait, you're going to give it to the Kohen, but the Kohen's supposed to eat the Bikurim. Now, how can the Kohen eat the Bikurim if it's consecrated? Kohen can't eat consecrated items. Diparik lahu. Well, they redeem it. Who redeems it? There's a debate. Does the Kohen have to redeem it, pay the money for it to be redeemed, and then remove the sanctity from it, and then they can eat it? Or, again, because it's only out of doubt, but redeem it because maybe in doubt, maybe it really is not Bikurim. Or, many people say it's actually the owner has to do the redeeming so that when they bring the Bikurim to the temple, the Kohen can actually eat them. Okay, but that's not going to resolve all our problems. So, Chulin B'Azara, we've resolved. We make it, we consecrate it out of suffix. But Dilmalat Bikurim Ninu, maybe it's not Bikurim. Now, what's the problem? If it's not Bikurim, well, Kamafkalu Mitruma Maaser. Now, Bikurim are considered Truma in the Torah. They use the same root of Truma, and that teaches us that Bikurim are exempt from all the tithes. But consecrated items are not exempt from tithes. If I have consecrated fruits, I have to tithe the produce before I bring it to the temple. So, right? Perhaps even before I consecrate it, I'm not sure. But they say, well, what you do is, since it might be not Bikurim, then you actually take the Truma and Masro before you bring it to the temple. So they say, okay, wait a minute though. If they're Bikurim, what happens? They all go to the Kohen. If it's true, if you're going to take some of it and take it for Truma and Maaser and all that, we're going to have a bit of a problem. Well, let's go through the list. Bishlama Truma Gedola. Well, the Truma Gedola that you separated, that anyway goes to the Kohen. So that's all fine. You give it to the Kohen, either it's Truma Gedola or it's Bikurim. Now we're talking about, right, you had, let's say, 100 fruits that were Bikurim, and you took 2 of them for Truma. So those 2 that were Truma go to the Kohen anyway. Maybe they're Truma, maybe they're Bikurim, either which way the Kohen eats them. Maaser Sheni, you take another 10th now for eating. Well, first you take Maaser Rishon, but we'll get back to that. That's last on the list because that's the one where there's a problem. Maaser Sheni, Nami Yavle the Kohen. You could give it to the Kohen because Maaser Sheni, I'm just supposed to eat the produce in Jerusalem, and I can give it to whoever I want. So I'll just give it to the Kohen to eat in Jerusalem. You know, either it's Bikurim and anyway goes to the Kohen, or it's not Bikurim and it's Maaser Sheni, and anyway the Kohen could eat it as long as he stays in Jerusalem. Maaser Ani, Nami Yavle the Kohen Ani. I'll find a poor Kohen. Okay, there's no shortage of poor Kohanim. Remember, they didn't even have their own land. So if it's the year where you're supposed to give Maaser Ani to the poor, I'll just give it to a poor Kohen, and then I've resolved that issue. Ela Maaser Rishon de Levihu, but the Maaser Rishon goes to a Levite. Leman Yavle, who are we going to give it to? So what did they answer? Very simple answer. You might remember this, so we also learned it. To Yavle the Kohen ki Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. We learned this a long time ago. It was a Gemara in Yavama. But you give it to the Kohen according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's approach, which is Titania Truma Gedola leKohen Maaser Rishon leLevi Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says Truma Gedola always goes to the Kohen. The Maaser always goes to the Levi. But Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Amal Maaser Rishon. Most people get rid of the words af laKohen. Debate about how to understand this, but we'll go with a version that doesn't have the word af. The Maaser Rishon goes to the Kohen. Why not to the Levi? What do you mean? It says in the Torah, you bring it to the Levi. But the Levites in the time of Ezra penalized them because they didn't go on Aliyah. Okay, for all those who haven't yet made Aliyah, here you go. They were penalized for not making Aliyah, and he took away the rights to get the Maaser. So from then on, some people think, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah thinks this, the Maaser all went to the Kohanim as well. So therefore, we resolved that issue. Well, another problem. Okay, so we've listed all these problems that it's the suffix, maybe Bikurim, maybe Hekdesh, and we have this in between, but we've resolved them all so far. Well, there's another problem. Dilma Bikurim ninu by Kriya. Wait a minute. If these really are Bikurim, you can't bring Bikurim without saying the text that goes along with the Bikurim. How do we know that? Well, we'll see. To which the Gemara says, what do you mean? Kriya lo ma'akva. No, you can't bring Bikurim. You're supposed to say the text, but if you don't say the text, it's okay. You're anyway fulfill your mitzvah. So since we can't say the text, so I'll fulfill my mitzvah anyway, even if I bring Bikurim without saying the text. To which the Gemara says, are you sure? Velo? Wait a minute. Hama Rabbi Zera, kol ra'oi labila ein bila ma'akevet bo. V'she'eino ra'oi labila bila ma'akevet bo. This halacha we've seen many times. It's talking about the mincha offering that you mix with the solet with the oil, and it has to be mixed. Now, you need a bowl that can fit. Okay, the bowl was a certain size. You can only put in the amount that can be mixed in the bowl. So now they say the following. If you didn't mix the dough for the meal offering, it's fine. It's not a critical part, even though it always says balul b'shemen, right? It's always mixed with the oil, but it has to be ra'oi to be mixed. So there was an assumption that you could have a certain size that would fit in this bowl. But if you put more than could actually be mixed without, what happens if you put too much in the bowl, it all spills over. So if you didn't mix it, it's okay. Under what condition? That there wasn't too much in the bowl. But if you put too much in the bowl that it couldn't have even been mixed if you wanted to, you didn't mix it, but you couldn't have mixed it, then it actually doesn't work. So if you can't, now let's take this to our case. You can't read the text because you're not sure if it's Bikurim or not, and therefore you can't read the text. Well, the text is not ma'akev, meaning you can fulfill the mitzvah without saying the text as long as you can potentially say the text. If in our situation you can't say the text, then it actually prevents you from being able to do the mitzvah. So now we're stuck because how can you read the Bikurim without being able to say the text? Because then you can't fulfill your mitzvah. To which the answer, now here's a little bit complicated. Besides the fact that you have to bring this and say that potentially this might be hekdesh and take truma masra to make sure to give it all to the Kohen, right? You have all these things you have to do. In addition, we're going to add one more thing. You could say that he did it like Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, meaning the only way to do this is according to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, and you would have to do the following thing. Now, first, let's see what Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina said, and then we'll finish up by explaining this, and that's the end of our daf. De'amar, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina said, "Bitzaran v'shalach biyad shaliach." If I picked the fruits and then I sent it with a messenger and they brought it to the temple, or the shaliach picked the fruits, we're missing a few words here. They're assuming you know what they mean, and then umeit shaliach baderech. So if the shaliach picked the fruits, started bringing them to Jerusalem on my behalf, let's say, then the shaliach dies, the messenger dies. Mevi ve'eno koreh. Both these situations, what's the same about both situations? The person who picked it is not the same person who brought it. My taima dichtiv says v'lakachta ve'eveta ad shetei lekicha v'ava ke'echad v'haleka. You would need to have it because it says v'lakachta ve'eveta, and it doesn't just say bring it. Obviously, if you're going to bring it, it's because you took it and brought it. So you didn't need to add the word lakachta. From there, they learn the lekicha and hava'ah, the taking of it, meaning picking, the way they understand taking, and the bringing of it to the temple has to be done by the same person. So what you would have to do in this case, since you're not sure it's Bikurim or not, you want to bring it. So you have to make sure that if you picked it, somebody else brings it for you to the temple. Or if someone else picked it, you have to make sure they're not the ones who bring it to the temple. You can bring it yourself. So with that, we resolved our questions. There might be more tomorrow. We'll see what else the Gemara comes up with here. But basically what we did today's stuff is we talked about the difference between buying 2 and buying 3 trees, and the machloket the Rabbi Meir had the rabbis about that. Rabbi Meir thinks even buying 2 trees, you acquire the land underneath. And we talked about in the Mishna about all the ramifications of whether you own the land or don't own the land. From there, we jumped to this Mishna in Bikurim, which had the same issue, that there's ramifications if you own the land or don't own the land. And Rabbi Meir was repeated there. Shmuel wanted to take it from there to say that he must go even farther and say even if you bought fruits from the shuk, which we eventually rejected that. We said that can't be, because Rabbi Meir seems pretty clear from some other source that that's not the case. And in addition, we had this other problem, which is, no, it was really the language of Rabbi Meir. Sorry, he said it explicitly. It's because you don't acquire the land when it comes to 1 tree. So therefore, it must be if 1 tree not, then for sure fruits in the shuk, you wouldn't have to bring Bikurim. And then we got into this whole question, how can you possibly bring Bikurim without, that's number 1, why even bring a Bikurim if you're not obligated in Bikurim? And then we suggested that perhaps it's all a question of they're in doubt. Rabbi Meir and the rabbis, each in their different situation, think that there's a doubt about whether you acquired the land or not. And that's why you have to bring the Bikurim. What about the Tchulim Bazara? What about the Truma? What about all these other issues? And then we resolved each issue one by one. That we finished for today. Wishing everyone Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov.